Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. All right, back again with answering another question for the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute here today. So this will be a short one, and that's okay. That happens from time to time. So George L. says, thanks, Alan. I always learn something from your videos. On the subject of corn, do you ever recommend malted corn or see any advantages to it? I certainly do. And so here in southern Indiana, one of the early spirits that was very, very common, what they called, quote unquote, common whiskey here in the Ohio Valley, before bourbon became a recognized category in the 1820s, because bourbon, let's face it, really is corn whiskey. That's where bourbon started at. Even the new charred oak requirement didn't come until much, much, much later on, post-industrialization. But one of the very common recipes that you would have seen here was 100% corn whiskey. Well, how'd they do that? Well, the cool thing about corn is that when you malt it, much like other grains that you malt, and malting basically being the germination of that grain up to a certain point in order to convert starch into sugar and also create alpha amylase and beta amylase, or glucanase as it were. Corn is not very efficient at converting other grains when it is malted, but it does have enough diastatic power to more or less malt the rest of itself, right? So in other words, anything that did not convert during the initial malting process will be converted in the mash, and you don't need a high temperature to do this. About 155 works just fine for 100% corn malt in my experience. If the malt corn is well converted, let's say that, because some people should probably honestly buy their malt instead of trying to make it. If you can't really watch it and pay attention, you don't know what you're looking for, I wouldn't suggest making it, although I do have a video on malting corn coming along. So Daisy Spring Mill, for example, one of the mash bills that was common there at that distillery that started in the 1820s was 100% malted corn. 100% malted corn makes a unique spirit for an all grain. In my opinion, it is much more approachable than a traditional corn whiskey, even 100% corn whiskey, as you would see with artificial exogenous enzymes. That's double pot distilled. I think 100% malted corn whiskey is much better. It's much more round. It's much more fatty. It's much more viscous. It has a kind of a nutty sort of flavor to it. Sometimes can even go towards Honey Nut Cheerios, etc. And I really, really, really like that. I also love malted corn in sugar shines or moonshines, however you want to call them, whatever you want to look at them as. Basically, when I say sugar shine, what I mean is 1 pound sugar, 1 pound of grain per gallon. That's what I consider a sugar shine, or a Prohibition forward era modern moonshine, although they were using sugar in certain areas before that, certainly, especially molasses, maple syrup, that sort of thing. I do love malt in those in small amounts, 10 or 20%, more than enough to do what you want to do, or at least what I want to do for flavor. You know, if you're going to make a 50-gallon batch and it's going to be 50 pounds of corn and 50 pounds of sugar to 50 gallons of water, I would take about 15 pounds of that corn and malt it and throw it in, right? And even maybe hit it with some light smoke of some kind, some cherry or some apple or something of that nature, even peach, I think is interesting. But that malt adds so much flavor and characteristic to that particular spirit, especially when you're dealing with 100% corn. Corn, a lot of times, unless it's one of the unique colored heirloom corns or modern created heirloom corns with a lot of different long chain amino acids, you know, yellow number 2 corn is just kind of sweet. It doesn't have a whole lot of flavor itself, you know. So it could use something to boost it. And I think a lot of times malting some of that can really boost that flavor profile and make it a much more interesting and approachable drink 100%. So I am all about malting corn for sure. And I'm all about the flavor that comes out of it. I even like to play around with malting different unique corns. My own Amanda Palmer, I've malted that many times and smoked it many times. My Elise corn, which is my Flint corn that I've worked on now for a few years, I've malted and smoked a few times and made whiskey out of. And it holds up to unique and interesting aging as well. So, you know, I was able to take that Elise and do an apple smoked malt corn out of that, which is interesting in and of itself, but then also to mature it to some degree on Amburana wood, which comes from Brazil, and it's very, very heavy baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, etc. And that corn held up to it just fine. So historically, yes, I'm very interested in malt corn. Flavor-wise, I'm interested in it. And I think quality-wise, there ain't nothing wrong with it. I actually find it a shame that there aren't more craft distillers doing malted corn. Now, it seems like the craft brewers are getting into it. And for example, my friend Caleb up at Sugar Creek Malt here in Indiana, he does make quite a bit of malt corn. So if you're a craft distiller, and he also sells to, I won't say that he sells to home distillers. I will say that he sells to home producers, home brewers, as it were. But, you know, there's a kind of a fuzzy area there. But he does sell some of those unique malted corns to home brewers, etc. If you want to get a hold of him, check out Sugar Creek Malt Company. He's always playing around with something cool. It's a family-owned farm, family-owned business. Great, fantastic brewer. One of the best good people you could ever meet in your life. But I think that answered your question. I'll get out of here tonight and make this a short video. And love you all. Reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, thealchemistcabinet.com, YouTube comments below, and or social media, etc. And we'll catch you later.